Good afternoon and welcome to the first Wheelhouse talk of our 2012 season, our new year. Thank you all so much for joining us. I'm Brian Flanagan. I'm Associate Director of the Allenstein Center at Grand Valley State University. We're so honored to have Dr. Marsha Rappley with us today, Dean of the Michigan State College of Human Medicine. And we will have Juliana Nahas, the president of our group, give her a more formal introduction in just a moment. But first I'd like to tell you a brief story about an alumnus of our Cook Leadership Academy, someone who once sat in those seats right with you, Lucius Hawkins. Lucius Hawkins is an example of one of those 4 definitions of Wheelhouse that we talked about last semester. He's an energizer. I don't know who here knows Lucius, but he is absolutely an energizer. Lucius first arrived at Grand Valley as a student athlete. He was a member of the Lakers football team from 2000 to 2004. Now, when Lucius arrived, GVSU did have a football tradition. Lots of 7 and 8 win seasons, even one undefeated season. But it had never won a playoff game, and it was in fact 5 and 5 the season before Lucius arrived. But something changed his freshman year. After going 0 and 3 to start the season, the team ended up going 7 and 4. In his sophomore season, the team went 11-0 on the regular season, won their first playoff game, made it all the way to the championship game before losing. In his junior season, Lucius would be named the team's defensive MVP. They went 11-0 again in the regular season, racking up 50, 60 points a game on offense. And again, they went all the way through the playoffs, made it all the way to the championship game, and this time won it. But the best was still yet to come. Lucius' senior season would be the one to remember. After graduating 25 starters, and I'll finish talking about football here in just a minute. You can tell I like talking about football. After graduating 25 starters, GVSU had some rebuilding to do. Its offense was much less proficient in Lucius' senior year, so defense had to step it up. He would once again go on to lead that defense. He'd be named MVP again, all conference honors, named top defensive back in the conference, everything else. The team again went 11-0, again marched through the playoffs, won the second ever national championship for Grand Valley, but it was a defensive showdown. 3-0 Lakers in the fourth quarter. North Dakota, the opponent at the very end of the game, drove the length of the field, was about to put it in when Lucius made a decisive play, forced a fumble, scooped it up, took it 60 yards to the other side of the field, set up the game-winning touchdown. It was in fact decisive, 10-3. Now Lucius, by his own account, was a quiet leader of these teams. He wasn't a vocal motivator, but he provided consistent, excellent performance, and people noticed. Now fast forward a few years. Lucius had graduated Grand Valley and was leaving a well-paying job in a correctional facility over on the other side of the state because he decided he needed to pursue some more education. When he came back to Grand Valley, he was a member of the security team full-time and a part-time student pursuing his first of 2 master's degrees. But here's what's significant. Here's what's notable. When Lucius joined that security staff, not a single officer or staff member was pursuing an education. Not one. Even though that's a free benefit to anybody who works at Grand Valley. Not one. Lucius dedicated himself to it. He worked day in and day out. He was a full-time employee, working at night, spending time away from his family to earn that master's degree, the first of 2. Others took notice, again. And by the time Lucius finished his master's degree, every single staff member, every single officer was pursuing a degree at Grand Valley. Okay? Lucius' example, his attitude, and his performance energized that team, just like it had the football team a few years earlier. And so the lesson for us here today is this. A big part of your role as leaders in the future, students, will be to play exactly that energizing role. Whether it's through force of personality, pace-setting performance, exceptional emotional intelligence, or a choice to live a life with character and integrity. And people will notice. And I think we'll hear a bit more about that today. So without further ado, I would like to welcome Juliana Nahas, President of the Cook Leadership Academy, to introduce our speaker today. Thank you. Juliana.
Thank you, and good afternoon. I'm very pleased to introduce Dr. Marsha Rappley, Dean of the Michigan State University College of Human Medicine. Before entering academia, Dr. Rappley began her medical career as a nurse's aide, became a licensed professional nurse, and then a registered nurse. She then went to medical school and specialized in pediatric neurology. Dr. Rappley has faced a number of challenges in her professional and personal life, yet has consistently found ways to overcome. She is known by her colleagues for her calm yet commanding presence, and her sister considers her to be one of the few good people left in this world. In reading the many profiles available on Dr. Rappley, I was struck by one specific story. I hope I'm not jumping the gun here with this story. But in the beginning of her career, while working at the Children's Hospital of Michigan in Detroit, a nursing supervisor came to her and asked if she wanted to work in the intensive care unit. Rappley responded saying she didn't think she was good enough. The supervisor responded, "Let me be the judge of that. You need to have faith in me that I understand things about you that you don't yet understand." After 20 years, Dr. Rappley came to understand the significance of that statement and has since mentored over 60 women from all walks of life, helping them to understand that you shouldn't limit yourself. And sometimes, other people see more in you than what you can imagine. Please join me in welcoming Dr. Marsha Rappley.
So I think that, first of all, I want to say that what Brian said about bringing energy to the people around you, that's one of the lessons that I learned early on as a dean. I realized that when we would have a meeting and everybody would come together, when I sat down, if I was like this, no matter how I felt, if I was showing that I was tired, that I was a little depressed, that I was aggravated, things weren't going right, that set the tone. That meeting would have that tone for an entire hour or 2 hours or half a day or a day long. And on the other hand, if I came in and I said, okay, what are we going to do? Even if the problem was huge and scary, we had people energized around figuring out what to do about that problem. The leader sets the tone. It's not only the optimism you carry, but the energy you bring into the room. And so when you feel that you don't have that energy, you have to kind of dig deep to find that, because you're carrying a lot with you. It's not just about you and how you feel in that moment. It's all the others who are looking to you. It's very much like this for a doctor to work with a patient. I can't go into a room and be depressed and distracted and just kind of down, because my patient is going to say, that's about me. Either there's something so horribly wrong with me that the physician behaves in this way, or he doesn't like me, or she doesn't really understand what I'm trying to say. She's not paying attention to me. These are the same things our colleagues feel about us as they look to us in our leadership role. We set the tone, and I just really want to thank Brian for describing that, how in that quiet way, it's not about being the boss of other people. It's about helping other people to find things within themselves. So now I'm going to tell you a little bit about me and why I'm not a very likely person to be the dean of a medical school. It's very unlikely that a person like me would lead a medical school. I'm going to step out of that for a minute and tell you what I think a dean does, what it is to be the dean of a medical school. I'm in charge of all the operations. I'm not really in charge, so that's not true. I'm responsible, okay? But I'm not in charge, which means I have to have a group of really good people working with me so that I don't worry when I get up in the morning that the educational program is going to be carried out and it's going to be superb, that the security is going to function in my building, that the elevators are going to go up and down. that the research lab is going to be operating in the way that it should, and that the investigators are going to have all the things that they need to do their job. I can't worry about that every single moment, because I have to be really focused on the future, on what's happening, how to position us as a medical school so that we can take advantage of our own unique contribution that we bring to healthcare and improving health. And if I'm not outwardly focused, if I'm looking in at all the operations pieces, I'm not going to be the guide that I need to be for my medical school. So operations is one, but another part that I'm sure you read your books about, how do you motivate, how do you inspire other people? I think that's really important. That is part of what we do. And we can learn to do better at that. Then you all come with some ability to do that, but you can refine that and take that to a higher level. But I think the most important thing we do as leaders is that we create a space for other people. That's what I do as a dean. I can't have all the bright ideas, right? If the whole medical school is defined by me and what I think about education and what I think about research, it would be a very poor place. It'd be an idea poor place. We have to look to the really talented, bright, creative, dedicated people that come to our workplaces, whether it's the med school or the hospital or Grand Valley State University. And then as leaders, we have to make a space for these people so their ideas, their passion can take root and can grow and can take us into places that we can't yet imagine. I thank Juliana for saying that, what we can't yet imagine, that's kind of a theme for me. There is so much that we can't yet imagine, yet we want to be part of it when it comes. And we want to be prepared to take the opportunities that come to us that we can't yet imagine. So that's a big theme for me in my career development, and I wasn't conscious of it early on. I'm going to go back now to those early on places. Why is it unlikely for me to be a dean? Well, because I took 11 years to get my bachelor's degree. No, I would not recommend that. I don't think that's a good path to go. I don't think I told my kids that for quite a while because I didn't want them to think that they could go to college for 11 years, you know. But that was the case for me. And part of it was dropping out to work, working and going part-time, because I liked working. I liked being in the workplace. I liked getting something done. But it also was a lot of sort of confusion. What do I want to do? Where am I going to settle? What's going to be a good use of my life? And I found that in nursing. And that relationship with patients gave me something to center and focus on. And that was a really important thing for me. I went to nursing, as some of you may have read in the article in the Grand Rapids Press, because there were not jobs in education at that time. Excuse me. This was in the early 70s. And teachers just were not being hired across the entire state of Michigan. So I went to nursing, and I really loved it, and a lot of the educational pieces and working with children was part of that. My first job was at Children's Hospital of Michigan in Detroit, and I was totally overwhelmed. And I am not exaggerating when I tell you that for the first 3 weeks on that job, I came home every night and I cried until I fell asleep. I was totally drained. I was exhausted. I thought I was completely inadequate. I was overwhelmed by taking care of 30-some very sick babies. And I had to walk around and make sure their IVs were still operating. And we had to look at our watches like this and watch the second hand and count the drips on those IVs. And if that drip went too fast, it could be horrible for the baby. They could have terrible side effects from the medicine I was giving. And if it went too slow, it might mean that they weren't getting the medicine that was going to help them to be better or perhaps be critical in their life. It was an enormous amount of pressure, and I really felt that I was not adequate, not up to it. So somewhere 3 weeks into this, I started my usual crying jag, and I just kind of started to have a talk with myself. And that's another thing that I think will help you in life. If you can pull yourself out of whatever's going on that's so overwhelming to you, and just have a very frank talk with yourself. And I said, you know, you either have to stop crying or you have to get another job, because this does not make sense. And if you want to work in this children's hospital, you just cannot cry every night when you come home, because that is just not going to cut it. So I thought about it, and then it came to me that there were probably about 200 nurses in this children's hospital, and every one of them got up, went in, did their job. They probably didn't go home and cry at night. And probably, I wasn't sure, so I'm not saying this in an overconfident way at all, but I thought, probably I'm as smart as they are. I'm probably trying harder than most of them, so probably I can do this too. But I had to sort of make that step. I had to force myself to stop moaning about it and then say, okay, I'm going to go in every day and I'm going to try to be the very best that I can be and figure out what I need to do to take care of these children. I was very focused in that way on trying to be better at what I was doing every single day, when the nursing supervisor came to me about a year later and asked me to go work in the ICU. And I did one of these sort of, you know, like, who is she talking to? You know, like, this can't be me. And she did. She said exactly that. You know, you have to let me be the judge of that. And I see that as a pivotal point in time too, because I never would have gone into the ICU. I never would have taken on that challenge. And I had to trust somebody else, that they actually did see things in me and could make that judgment about me. So I took that risk. To me, that was huge. I thought, what am I going to start? If I cried on the infant ward, what am I going to do in the ICU, where people are actually in that point between life and death? And what we were doing was so critical to their survival. A very intense environment, exhilarating. I thrived in that environment. I had no idea that I would. It was so intense that 30 years later, I'm at a conference of leaders in pediatrics, and I meet Dr. Ashok Sarniak, who now is the director of the ICU at Children's Hospital in Detroit. He was a resident when I was a nurse, and we both so clearly remember a patient that we took care of who had Reye syndrome, who was very close to death. We probably did not go home from the hospital for 2 or 3 days. It was that intense, what our team had to do in caring for that young man. So those kinds of experiences, they're formative in so many ways. But I think what I want you to hear is that sometimes people see things in you that you don't see in yourself, or you don't feel, you haven't yet understood. And give it a try. Take a risk with that and see what happens when you have that faith in somebody else. I think another pivotal point for me was later on after my illness. So Juliana talked about my own illness. I had cancer about 20-some years ago, lung cancer. Fortunately for me, it was a very rare form of lung cancer, and removing a portion of my lung, the cancer did not return. I didn't know that. Nobody knew that then. So I really thought I had a terminal illness. My children were 2 years old and 4 years old. When I finally decided that I had to return to work, this would have been 4 months after my surgery, I went back into an environment in which my entire team was gone. I was the only one remaining. And here I had just had this catastrophic illness and still not certain about my own prognosis. The person who was at the heart of that unit of pediatrics is someone who was an icon in pediatrics, greatly loved, a wonderful person who not only was my mentor in my career development, but took care of my own children. And he had died of a catastrophic sudden illness, just wiped out, taken away. The other members of my team had either taken other jobs within the university or moved to a different country, actually. So it was just me. And I realized that there was only one person that could help me in this, and it was a person I didn't like very much. It was another famous pediatrician, but I always thought he was rude and arrogant and very self-absorbed. I couldn't hardly stand to have a conversation with him because he never really related to me as a person, I didn't think. It was always sort of this, pontificating about everything that drove me crazy. So I sat across the table from him, and it really was an eye contact. It wasn't even a discussion. We just looked at one another dead on, and we realized it was just the two of us. And we were either going to let this work go, what we had all worked so hard to establish and create a clinic where we would care for children that very few people would take care of, kids who had horrible chronic diseases or terribly debilitating conditions and didn't have many places to go for help. Would this all go down? I'm the only person left. He's got to help me, and we can hardly stand one another. It was pretty obvious, though, that even though we didn't like each other, the thing that we wanted to do, the thing that meant the most to us, was more important than the things we didn't like about one another. And okay, so he's rude and arrogant, and he always blows off about everything. I guess I could tolerate that because he believes in helping these families too, and he wants our energy and our work to go towards that. So that was kind of a pivotal point for me as I look back, to realize that I could actually work with people that I didn't like. I don't have to be around people who were just like me. I didn't have to be around people who would think like me. That sometimes the things that we see as obstacles to working with one another, they're not as important as the things you can accomplish together. And I'm so glad that he and I were able to overcome that difficult point. And we went on, with his help, I established what became the most successful division in our entire department and continues to be so today. So it was almost gone, and we held on to it. We made something of it, and I take a lot of pride in that. But I know it's because I overcame that sense that I could only work with people that I liked. And I think probably the last point I'll make about a pivotal point in my own development, it comes when I'm at a point when I'm not quite the dean, but I have a lot of responsibility. I'm in charge of everything related to students in the college. And we have this situation in which we have a program, but we have 0 students who want to participate in it, okay? 0. And this has been culminating over the years. So we've been getting the message, this is bad, we don't like it, we don't want to go there. And finally this year, nobody wants to go. So it also happens at a point that you will come to understand there are other pressures on your universities, on your colleges, on you, that are not related to the best educational program or to the service that you need to provide either to your patients or your students. They're related to extraneous political issues. And we can dismiss political issues and those kinds of business pressures, but they are very real for our institutions. And we were facing a situation in which the health of Michigan State University perversely depended on success in this program that nobody wanted to be part of. And the president of the university looks at me and she says, I know you are in a rock and a hard place, and I don't know how to solve this for you, but you have to solve this problem for me and for Michigan State. There were tens of millions of dollars at stake on this. And I knew that, and she knew that. So I look at her, And she was not saying, you have to fix this or I'm not going to give you a raise. Okay? She didn't say that. She didn't say, either you come up with a solution or you're out of a job. She said, you have to do this for MSU. Right? So I said, okay. I said, we're going to make this happen. And we're going to have a program, and we're going to have people who want to go. It's going to be a success. And she said, thank you. So I walk out of the room and I go, what have I done? I did not have a clue about how I was going to put a program in there that people would want to participate in. I did not have a clue as I walked out that door. But I had faith in my own resourcefulness, okay? I'd been in this spot. It was such a comfortable place to be. It was like, I've been here before, right? When there's just no apparent solution, when there's just no lining up of resources and will and intent and good faith. So I said, okay, I just have to have faith that if I let myself be creative, if I give myself a little space, something will come and I'll figure out a way to create this program. So I went back to, so what is it that you have to do to get something that students will want to come to and be part of? Well, you have to figure out what they are interested in, what really is compelling. And that wasn't so hard, you know, when you think about it, you can ask them, right? And you can go back to the things that they tell you all along. I'm proud to say my students have always said, we want places where we can serve in a really important way, where we can make a difference in people's lives. So I could take this place, part of our state, economically depressed, certainly full of people who are not served well by the medical community. I mean, here I have my students telling me they want to learn how to work in these environments because they want to make a difference in this world. So I set up, I had the idea. I didn't set it up. I had the idea. Okay, what if we then use this as a strength and we say, let's create a program that's not about visiting poor people. It's not about hanging out watching somebody do something for somebody who can't get care anywhere else. It's about learning the skills that I need as a young physician to make a difference, to go into an environment like this, to change systems, to change delivery, to change the healthcare that's available, the access available to people who are underserved. It's the leadership skills, it's the know-how. There's a whole set of things that one has to know how to do in order to work in a migrant clinic, in order to work in an urban clinic, to work in a rural portion of a country that is very resource challenged. It's not just about the goodwill or the wanting to help other people. You got to know some things in order to make this stuff work. So how about if we set up a program where we teach to that? We teach people the skills that they need to be successful in these very challenged environments. And it was such a success. It took off very slowly, and I had to pass it to another person, okay? Because as a dean, I can't be running one little program. I have to run the whole deal. That was a very hard thing to do, okay? I had to pass this to someone else and say, can you make this work? And they did. And this became a program that we had 70 students applying for 18 positions. We had half of our medical students wanting to be part of this program, and we could only accept 18. So the point there is that it was a very high stakes moment. I wanted to please the president. I wanted to do something that, I wanted to make sure that our action as a medical school did not jeopardize Michigan State University. So I took on that responsibility with enough faith in myself that I would figure out something to do. So that worked out. It could have been a disaster, but that did teach me to trust my own resourcefulness and to give myself the space and the opportunity to solve the unsolvable problem. I think that there are really three things that I would have learned from my own path as I've come to be the dean of the medical school. One is it's not just about believing in yourself, I mean, it takes that. You have to believe in yourself and have that confidence. But you have to open yourself up to new ideas and to new opportunities. So when people say, you might think about this, you don't shut down and say, I'd never do that, or I can't do that. You try it on. Mentally try it on. See if that is something that you could work with, that you could go with. If you're not open to these other ideas about yourself, you're going to lose so many chances to, and grow in so many ways that, again, you can't imagine. It goes back to that theme. It's also about having that serious talk with yourself. So maybe you say at some point in time, no, I really can't do this. My children are babies, so I'm not going to do that right now. Okay, when am I going to do that? Well, okay, let's see. Maybe when they're 5 and they're in school. Maybe I could do that. What would have to happen in order for me as a young mother to take more responsibility in my organization and try on some leadership roles? I could say, no, I can't do that, or that could never happen. Or I could reframe that question. And that's the other thing I want you to think about. When you're faced with something that seems impossible, the question to ask is, what has to happen in order for me to do this? What has to happen in order for this to succeed? Because as you begin to pull out the elements of what has to happen, most of them are doable. Most of them can be tackled. In its enormity, you couldn't imagine that I would build that division of pediatrics by myself, having just had still in the bout with cancer, with 2 little children at home. And I had to say, what has to happen? Well, I had to get somebody to help me with the housekeeping, okay? That's as important as having the right mentor in the workplace. So being able to reframe those really tough questions as what has to happen, I think, helps you break it down into smaller, doable pieces, and then you can do things that you never thought you could do. I think the most important piece, though, is honoring and respecting your own pathway. How have you come to the spot that you're in right now? Okay? Some of you think about your family. Each of you, of course, is an individual and has your own story, but you think about your family, you think about your friends, you think about the things that have been overwhelming to you. Those have shaped you as much as your success. And respect that. Respect those times when you failed, because they will help you the next time you're confronted with that challenge. And if you suppress that, if you don't respect what you did in that situation and learn from it, you're not going to be moving on. You won't deal with the next one very well. That is a little bit glib, it's easy to say. So take some time to reflect on it. I think that as leaders, it's up to us to take this up a notch, okay? So now we have to consider the pathways that you bring to your roles. So it's not just about how you reflect on yourself. It's about how I, as a leader, as a dean, look at the CVs. How do I hear about your story, how you developed over time? Am I going to look for the traditional path, or am I going to be open? Am I going to respect? Am I going to honor the kinds of decisions that people have made to stay home with their children for a certain period of time? What had to happen graduating from high school where less than 10% of the people go on to college? Why did a person go to community college before they went to university? Probably not because they're stupid, okay? There are probably some other things that went into that decision. We have to honor the various pathways as leaders, as people who choose the emerging leaders. We need to be honoring the variety of pathways that you bring, that you demonstrate. One is because it's right. Okay, so it's a moral issue for me. But second, we now know, and this is kind of cracks me up a bit, there are mathematical equations that show us that the more diversity among the people of a group making a decision, the better those decisions are. And there are equations that tell you how to build that diversity such that people are now using it in betting and a gambling type of competition. Who can create the most diverse teams to win a prize kind of thing. And there's Scott Page wrote a book about this. That's really fascinating. But what tickles me is that, there has to be a mathematical equation in order for us to pay attention to this notion. But if you want to solve a problem, if you have a group and they're all experts in that problem, it's not going to work as well as if you bring in people who are not experts and who come from a totally different walk of life. And we have learned this the hard way in medicine, and we're still trying to assemble those groups that include the business world, that include not just social service agencies, but for-profit organizations, that include citizens and members of the communities that we seek to serve. So that whole honoring of pathways, it's about much more than me, it's about much more than you. It's a way to create a very rich working environment in which people can thrive and that people want to be part of. And so I think that is going to be a very important aspect of our success as a medical school. But I see it and more generally across all of our endeavors as we try to solve these really difficult social problems.